All right, we are live. Everybody, welcome to Dad Talk Today. We've been talking about doing this today. I'm joined by Jeff Younger, one of the first interviews he's got to do since the word that we got yesterday, Jeff. So for anybody that's not aware, because I know we're going to have a lot of first-time viewers, I think this case, there's way more people that know about this than some of the other cases just because of how long this has been going on and the magnitude of it. But for anybody that hasn't heard of it, maybe give us in a nutshell what's been going on and then the conclusion that happened yesterday.
Okay. Well, starting at age 3, my ex-wife, who's a pediatrician, began to transition my son to a girl. She would put my son into timeouts and say things like, don't be a boy, the monsters only eat boys, because he was saying he was afraid of monsters. This resulted in all kinds of trouble. Obviously, I took my first iPhone video of my son telling me that his mom's, saying he's a girl, and he was believing it. That went viral on YouTube. It led to our divorce trial. The custody evaluator, his name is Blake Mitchell. He works out of Dallas County, Collin County, and Denton County in Texas. Lied in his report. That won't surprise anybody in Dad Talk Today that a custody evaluator lied. He asked me what my number one issue was in the divorce, and I said, well, it's that my wife is tampering with my son's gender identity. He investigated that for a year and determined that I had made a false allegation and that she was not tampering with my son's gender identity, which now we know that was complete bullshit. So on that basis, they gave me less than standard possession. I started the normal schedule. I was taking my son to school, picking him up from school, starting on Thursdays and Fridays and stuff. I'd bring my son to school in boys' clothes, and the school helped transition my son to a girl behind my back. They would put my son into a dress that they kept at school and then have him use the girls' restroom. This ramped up to eventually we had another trial in 2019, and that was a jury trial. And at that trial, I got 50-50 custody, no child support, and a check on all medical procedures. The Dallas County judges got really upset and transferred my case sua sponte out of the 255th District Court to the 301st District Court under Judge Bloody Mary Brown. Bloody Mary Brown systematically stripped me of all parental rights using temporary orders, so they were not appealable in Texas, eventually culminating in giving me supervised visitation, and eventually culminating in giving my wife permission to move my son to California. I went up to the Texas Supreme Court, and I argued that since we had a law passed in Texas that made these illegal, and in fact it's child abuse in Texas, that my ex-wife could not move my son to California because it was for the purposes of child abuse. The Supreme Court disagreed with me and said, Justice Blacklock, who's the Chief Justice on the court, I call him Black-Hearted Blacklock, he said that my son was no more at risk of being transitioned to California than in Texas, and my ex-wife moved to California. I go into the California courts, and we just had a trial. I brought in Miriam Grossman as my expert. She did an excellent job. They brought in some woman who was dressed as a man, and we had a trial. We had a 7-day trial. I argued it myself without a lawyer. I also filed a federal lawsuit to get rid of the unconstitutional gag order that I was under. One of the things that came out during that, they made a mistake in one of their emails, and instead of sending people to putting addresses in the BCC field, they put it in the CC field. And I discovered that all this 10 years, I've been fighting a coalition of lawyers that are funded by Paul Singer and George Soros. And I've been fighting some of the most powerful law firms and nonprofit foundations in America, which explains my long series of losses. I finally got my ruling yesterday. The judge did remove the unconstitutional gag order, but prohibits me from posting pictures or any personal identifying information about my children, including pictures. I must have all contact, not just possession time, but even phone contact has to be supervised. I have to pay a supervisor, and gave my ex-wife sole managing conservatorship in uh, California parlance. She has sole legal custody rights, and that gives her all the rights necessary to castrate my son without my permission. And that's where we are today.
So obviously, talking the transition surgery came a little bit later, but you started seeing that she was doing this really early on, right, Jeff?
Yeah, 2.5 years old.
2.5 years old.
Yeah,
what were some of the things that were happening?
So I told you about the timeouts. There was some very strange behavior where she would isolate me from my sons. She would take them out without me, and I don't know where they went, and she wouldn't tell me where they went. I think they were going to a psychologist or something. And her daughters began to act very strange. She tried to use abuse claims against her daughter. And she did force me out of the house by doing that. But at court, she was kind of stymied because as a pediatrician, she's a mandatory reporter. And I just asked her if she, as a mandatory reporter, did she ever report abuse? She said no. So that didn't fly in court. Once I was out of the house, she actually began to socially transition the boy. She would put James in a dress and take him to the mall and stuff in a dress just to get him used to it.
So no, for one of the things that happens in this case every time is they try to find these different things to justify what was going on, or this couldn't actually be happening the way that they're saying that this is happening. Guys, I want to go through some of those really quick though, Jeff. One of the things that I've been seeing brought up, and you've mentioned it numerous times, but I really want the audience to understand this, is they're wanting you to do supervised visitation. And you said you are not going to do it. And I am behind you 100%. I wouldn't do it either under those circumstances. Let them know why you refuse to do those supervised visitations and what happens when you go there. What is that super visitation going to be like for you if you do go?
So the supervision company that was ordered in Texas is a company called FCS, or Forensic Counseling Services, out of Dallas. They refused to let me change my son into boys' clothes when he came to the visitations. And my son is very embarrassed to be in a dress around me. So he might hide from me or whatever, and they would just report that as my son being fearful to me. It was just an attempt to create a false record that they could use against me. That's actually the real purpose of supervised visitation. It's not to protect children. It's to create a record against the parent that's being supervised. I eventually did do 2 supervised visits in LA County. While I was in those visits, I was constantly scolded by the supervisor. They wouldn't let us leave the room, so we just spent time in a white room, with white walls, very bare surroundings. And my sons wasn't a very nice visit. The second visit, my son Jude got very fearful. I think these visits are psychologically damaging to children. I think they reinforce in the child's mind that there's something wrong with the father and that the father is somehow dangerous. It also undermines parental authority because you have to be supervised and you're being overridden by somebody else. So there's just lots of reasons that I refuse to do it, not least of which that they require me to affirm James as a girl.
One of the other things that's going on is I've seen this used against you a lot. Is they try to make it look like, well, this isn't what she's really doing. She doesn't want to do this to the child. But then every time she gets access, we keep seeing more and more of that happening. Why is it that they try to act like this is not what's really happening? What are some of the tricks that's been used against you in this case?
Well, I mean, they have consistently said that for example, they want the permanent injunction in place that would prohibit her from doing these transgender procedures. And that was what they told the Supreme Court of Texas. In fact, the Supreme Court of Texas, in their opinion against me, said it would be almost impossible for Mother to argue for castrating James, because she's argued to every single Texas court for 8 years that it was in James's best interest not to have these procedures. But all that was a sham. It was simply a way to deal with the fact that it was illegal in Texas. And eventually, when she got to California, she was able to do what she wanted. Shockingly,
So guys,
Republicans in this
go
state,
ahead.
in the state of Texas, Republicans in this state, in the
Yep.
appeals courts and at the Texas Supreme Court, have systematically aided her in every way and have ruled against me every single time.
You know, and let's, you know, guys, I am watching the chat. I'm trying to give some of the questions that I would think somebody that hasn't heard this before might want to hear. A lot of you are familiar with this case. So if you got some, put them down in the comments and I'll take them to Jeff. Jeff, who are some of the people that you went to for help that turned their back on you? Because there's been a lot of them, and I think people need to know about this.
Yeah, I've been to almost all the conservative foundations, First Liberty, all Alliance Defending Freedom, all of them. None of them will help me. One that I won't mention because I've agreed to, normally I name names. One of the top conservative foundations was actually calling expert witnesses preemptively, telling them not to work with me. I lost 2 expert witnesses because they had preemptively called them. I got help from some people in the Republican Party, like Matt Rinaldi, but by and large, the entire Republican establishment of Texas turned against me, and they helped my wife transition my son to a girl.
In what ways did somebody try to reach out to Governor Abbott? I know there was a push many times to get him involved in this case. Can you tell me all of the attempts, you know, who done that and what you got in return for doing that?
You know, I basically was at a donor event and talked to a donor, and he asked me if Greg Abbott was helping me, and I said no. I think he's working against me. Oh, I see Dia is in the chat. Hey, Dia.
Yes.
Love you. Hope you're doing well. I actually went to talk to this donor. He pulled out his phone and called Greg Abbott right in front of me. And the next day, Abbott tweeted about it. But the thing is, you know, you got to understand what's going on with the Republican Party. And I think it's very important for people to get this idea.
Please listen, guys.
So imagine that you're a representative. Say you're in the Senate or the House in the Texas state. You know, you have a problem here because the donor class of the Republican Party is far left. They're extremely liberal, and the voting, the electorate that's going to vote for you is far right. So how do you solve this problem? Well, you pass bills that seem like they're conservative for your conservative voters, but then have loopholes so they have no effect, so they please the donors. And I think it's also important for people to know, you know, I'm a lifelong Republican, so I was quite shocked to learn this. But the transgender movement was started by Republicans. It was not started by Democrats. The real leader that started all this stuff was Paul Singer, who's the largest donor to the Republican Party. He also founded the Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest and most powerful LGBT lobby in the world, and also creates the corporate index of that grades corporations on their hiring practices. So it's strange. You know, the Republican Party has extremely liberal donor class and a very conservative electorate. So that's why the Texas Republican establishment turned on me, because I had worked so hard to get a bill passed to ban this stuff in Texas. And I forced a public vote on it, which they did not want to do. They really didn't want to pass that bill. And so they took it out on me, and they helped Democrat judges take my kids from me.
Roman Brick on here said something I wanted to ask you about. He says Musk apparently chimed in on Jeff's interview earlier today with Pearl on X. Any follow up? Was you aware of that, Jeff?
I haven't seen the reply on Pearl's interview. He did reply to some earlier posts, so I know that he's aware of this, and I feel for Musk because
absolutely.
If you ever hear him, Musk is Musk is one of these guys that when you see him with his kids, he's kind of like me and like you and like a lot of other fathers that I know with dad talk. We love being dads. And being dad is a big part of our identity, and it's one of the most important things in our lives. And you can tell Elon Musk loves being a dad. And when he talks about losing his son to this transgender woke mind virus, you can see it hurts his heart. And I think he's a good man. And I think he will help push the Trump administration to do something about this federally.
I believe that wholeheartedly too. We've had that in private conversation. It's like, if we could get to Musk, I think he would definitely get behind this, because he lost his lost a child. He didn't necessarily lose it, but in many ways he did.
Yes.
That's what you did. You lost a child.
Yeah.
And this little social experiment that's going around, it's dangerous. This is extremely dangerous to what they're doing. And I'm glad it does seem like more and more people are starting to talk out about it. Let's get down into some of like the research and what's so dangerous about this. Puberty blockers. What are the reason behind these puberty blockers, and why are they so keen on doing this to kids? I think the majority of people that you would hear from say, even though I might not agree with it, if a kid is of age, they're 18, it's fine, do whatever you want to do. But at such a young age, you do not have the mental capacity or you don't realize the consequences that come along with this. Why do they want to push this on kids so much, Jeff?
So I think the fundamental reason for the big push for transgenderism, a lot of the LGBT movement, the big push to remove fathers from homes on an industrial scale, lots of other strange things, tax things and policy issues, and even work visa and border issue things that come up. They're all oriented to one aim, and that is to dispossess and disempower the American middle class. And I think it's being done for a political reason. If you look around the world, no other country do they even believe in free speech. Canada says free speech is actually evil. They hate free speech. You don't have free speech in the UK, Germany, France, anywhere in Europe. There's no Western country anywhere that you have free speech. You don't have Second Amendment rights anywhere but America. You don't really have freedom of religion. In most countries in the world, you have to pay taxes to an established religion. You don't have, people don't think about this, but you don't have the right to remain silent in most countries. You're required to incriminate yourself if you're asked questions. And if you don't, that's another felony that you can go to prison for. So all of these rights that we cherish don't really exist anywhere but in America. And if you think about inside America, our elites don't really want free speech. They've been trying to censor us on social media for I don't know how long. Dad's issues have been censored on YouTube so bad. That's our elites. They don't want to talk about issues that are important to the people. They don't want Second Amendment rights. They don't want Fifth Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment rights. They don't want Sixth Amendment rights to an attorney. Our elites don't really believe in this stuff. So similarly, the lower classes in America, because they're beholden to the federal government on welfare programs, pretty much want what the bureaucracy wants, which is what the elites want. So you have literally one group in the entire world that supports this American conception of human rights, and that's the American middle class. And unfortunately for the globalists, the American middle class are who decides elections for president and foreign policy for the United States. So we have outsized influence in the American middle class. And I think they want to break down our political influence in support of a globalist agenda. And they're going to do that by breaking down our families, breaking down our economic capabilities, and that will stunt our political abilities. That's the fundamental motivation. How does it play out with the transgender thing? Well, you just have to look who funds it. It's all of these rich globalist elites funded the transgender movement. In 2016, overnight, you had multi-$100 million gender clinics sprouting up in all 50 states at the same time. Okay, that doesn't happen by accident. That requires years of planning to pull that shit off. So that was a planned takedown. At the same time, Obama, that's what I say. It's a bipartisan thing. Obama puts into his insurance regulations that insurance has to cover it and the federal government has to reimburse it. So now these gender clinics, when they transition a child, that child is a $4.5 million lifetime income stream to that clinic. They're making it's basically residual income, kind of like insurance or financial planning. They're just making giant income streams out of these kids and monetizing them.
So, mentioned this a little bit before we came on, and guys, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation right here. Trump has made a video saying that one of the first things that he's doing in office is banning these surgeries on kids. If this is true and he follows through with this, we've got just a couple of months. I don't even know if it's 2 full months now. We've got just a couple of months before he takes place in office. I'm assuming your ex knows this. And now that she has access, my fear, Jeff, and I'm just putting it out there because we got to be honest with the people. She's going to try to escalate this thing. In my opinion, I am thinking she is going to try to escalate this thing because she knows there's only so much time left.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's why they tried to do an emergency order back in February to get this done. I think they saw that what was in the cards, that there was a real chance that they could get an adverse election outcome. And she was being told by these foundation lawyers, these Soros and Paul Singer Foundation lawyers, that she really needed to, start doing this immediately. And she got cooperation from Kaiser Permanente and from LA Children's Hospital.
Mutual friend of ours, John Gallman, said, Jeff, please advise these men on the most important weapon they have, the ability to self-regulate and keep their emotions in check. Before you do that, I would like to say, I can't imagine what it would be like having to be inside of your shoes, being told inside of a courtroom that you're not allowed to call your son by his actual name, having to pay for this, knowing that they're doing this, experiment on your kid and you're paying dearly for it. And that no matter what you do in the courtroom, there's never any relief. The family law system is broken. There's some that will say it's working exactly as it's designed. I understand that, but it is broken, guys. It does not work. It doesn't. And when going through this, you have a lot of these guys that I don't know how you have kept your emotions in check. I know you're angry. Obviously, you're pissed off. How hard has that been for you being in that courtroom and not just saying, you know how I really feel? I imagine that's got to be real hard on you. And what's the importance of making sure that you don't do that?
So one of the ways, the most important way that I have been able to self-regulate, as John Gallman says, is through prayer and fasting and doing good works. I go to church. I pray for my sons. I don't get wrapped up in material concerns, and I try to help people who are in my similar situation. And I have this belief that anytime you feel despair, What you do is you work, you get productive, and you make your situation 1% better. And if you make your situation 1% better, you'll feel better. And after 100 days, if you're making your situation 1% better, it's 100% better. And the problem is solved. But you gotta focus on that. That's the first thing. Second thing, I was in a deposition early on in my divorce, and I realized they were trying to tempt me into violent language in the deposition. And I realized that being calm and giving back peace when they give you anger and hate was a very effective weapon against them. And it backfired on them over and over and over and over again in the trials that I've been in. I essentially got 50-50 custody because there was this huge disconnect between the violent guy that they were describing and the peaceful man that the judge saw. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the second thing. The third thing is that I think there's a mental attitude that this is probably peculiar to men. So to my dear friend Dia, this may not be as applicable, but I'm a boxer. My father was a bare knuckle boxer, and my uncle was a wrestler and a boxer. And in boxing, what they tell you when you get hit is you don't get angry and then go after the guy. You don't cower in fear or act like it hurts. You want to be RoboCop. They hit you in the jaw and you move your head and you just keep going as though nothing happened. And it's extremely disconcerting to an enemy to have the feeling that no matter what they do, they can't control your emotions and make you act out. It's very, very disconcerting. To the point where I have had lawyers put me on cross-examination and try for 5 hours to get me to do that kind of stuff. And I've watched female lawyers sit down in tears because I just broke her. She just could not do it. So being calm, focusing on facts, and being real about the situation, and being credible. Another thing is, and I think this helps me be calm, because I don't have to worry about a story that I'm telling. I just tell the truth. Sometimes the truth is not flattering to me. Sometimes it doesn't make me look super good. But all I have to do is tell the truth. I don't have to worry about anything. And I'll say this, when you tell the judge the truth, even when it's not flattering, the judge gets the sense that you can be believed. And that you're a kind of person who has a habit of telling the truth. And this was actually in the California case. The judge actually said that. He said, one of the things I want to tell you is I appreciate you've been totally honest in this courtroom, even when it hasn't been flattering to you. And that tells me I can believe the other things that you've said. So I think there's something to just being an honest person. Nobody's perfect. Relax. Negative things are going to come out. Just relax. Fight the false negative things and just admit the stuff that's real.
I think admitting your flaws and people seeing you be real just goes so much further, man. Because you have
it's
to.
Not fake. It's not fake.
Fake.
And almost everything in family court's fake. And you really stand out if you're just a real person. I'll give you an example. During this trial, they showed me an email that I had with opposing counsel where opposing counsel was trying to get me to sign a non-disclosure agreement. It was supposed to just be for medical records, but of course this agreement was super expansive and would even allow opposing counsel to designate statements I make outside of court as confidential. In other words, it was basically a gag order that my ex-wife could just decide to use against me anytime she wanted. So I sent back a real nasty email and I said, this is bullshit. I'm not going to sign this, basically. And she presented that and she said, all I wanted to do was just, secure your son's medical records and look how you treat me, And I just looked at the judge and I said, you know what? I was very upset because I had been bankrupted again in litigation. And I sent this email in anger. I'm sorry that I sent this email and I apologize to opposing counsel. And I said, in the next break, let's step outside and I will seriously look at this agreement. I just admitted that I was being a jerk there. And that helped my credibility tremendously.
This is something I've been seeing many people ask me. Kareen Kissel said, Jeff Younger, have you gone federal yet? You need to get in federal. Many people have been asking about that.
I have a federal case. I've sued my judge and my ex-wife. My gut feeling is that I'm going to not satisfy a Rule 12 challenge, and the case will be dismissed. I was only going for declaratory relief for the gag order, but this new ruling actually removes the unconstitutional gag order for me. So I really don't have a basis for declaratory relief anymore. I have seen many cases go up to federal court out of Texas, and almost all of them fail. And the reason they do is, we all know, is because the Supreme Court promulgates a rule called the domestic relations exception. If any people here are new, you can Google that. It's not a statute. It's not a case. It's just a rule propounded by the U.S. Supreme Court, which says that they're just not going to take any cases out of state family courts. So our cases are almost always unsuccessful because the Supreme Court of the United States has just decided that family courts don't need oversight, and they're not going to give it. And that's something that we need to take out of their hands. We need to, I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about the federal courts. All of the courts, the district courts and the appellate courts, are actually Congress's courts. Congress sets the appellate jurisdiction for the courts in the United States. The Constitution only recognizes one court. That's the U.S. Supreme Court. So since Congress can set the appellate jurisdiction, it can override the domestic relations exception rule and force the courts to take civil rights and constitutional rights cases out of family court. And we need somebody in the House and the Senate to sponsor bills to do just that.
Andrew's on here said, how did it backfire when they're about to mutilate your child? I'm guessing like when that gets brought up in the court about this chemical castration, has there been any pushback inside the courts on that topic?
Well, the context in which I was talking, it was in a contempt proceeding in which they were going to put me in jail, into the LA County jail. So that didn't happen. And I think it was because I was a credible witness. So that's what I mean by it didn't backfire.
Yeah. Is this something, and I try to tell this because, you know, we're going to have probably more than anything that, you know, the viewers say, man, this is such a sad case, you know, but I'm so glad because this would never happen to me. Is this something that you ever thought that you would be going through, Jeff?
Good Lord, no, man. I'm not a man by nature, you know, by temperament, who is good at, you know, leading democratic movements or anything like that. I'm sort of an introvert. I mean, that's one thing that me and Musk have in common. But I decided to do what I had to do to just protect my son, and I never expected that I would have to mobilize almost the entire citizenry of Texas to stop my son from being castrated. And I definitely never would have thought that I had to mobilize the citizens of Texas against the Republican Party to protect my son from being castrated. So there have been a number of surprises here.
So for somebody, you know, again, that's obviously there's lots of people that are upset about this, but for somebody that thinks like, you know, this would never happen to me. Why should this matter to everyone, Jeff? I think it's kind of obvious, but let's put it out there for everybody. Why should they get involved?
Well, it's real simple. If the government has the authority to do something, it will do it. All of history is a testament to that. The whole principles that the American government is based on, but you don't really need American government principles. You can just look at the history of governments, period. If they have the authority to do something, they will, in fact, do it. Government will expand to the maximum extent of the authority that it's afforded. If my son, who presents as a boy with everyone except his mom, where he presents as a girl, If a boy that does not consistently present as a girl can be chemically castrated, they can get any child in this country. And I think that's actually the calculation that the transgender ideologues made when they started backing my ex-wife, these foundations and so forth. The danger is that the most fundamental right you can imagine for a child is bodily autonomy. You can't cut body parts off of kids. And when that goes, I don't know where the limits are at that point. At that point, what's
There
rape?
is none.
What's rape? What's facial mutilation? There at that point, what we have ceded is the government has total control of our children and can even sexually abuse them whenever they want. There's no limit to government authority if this is allowed to stand.
Absolutely not. They're just going to keep pushing. Great question right here from Cold Summer on YouTube. He said, why do you think she is only doing this to James and not your other son?
First of all, I don't actually believe my ex-wife thinks James is transgender. I think she's just hurting James in order to hurt me. That's the first thing. When she first started doing this and I told her to stop, she would kind of make fun of me and say, James looks like you. He's the baby that looks like you. And James does look just like me when I was a kid. I think she picked James just because he looks like me and she can hurt him and she can't hurt me. And he looks like me. He's basically like a voodoo doll, I think, that she can torture. She also has a habit of picking a winner and a loser child. She did this with her daughters. I had to actually put a stop to that. It really rose to an abusive level at one point. And I think she picked James as the winner child, the one that can do no wrong, the special child, the child she can put forward. And Jude is the child that can't ever do anything right, is the backward child, and has to serve the wonder child. And I think she's got that in her mind as well.
Brian Harrell on here said, stay strong, Dad. Can you explain the hearing/motion when she filed to move to California?
Yeah.
What gave her the ability to do that, Jeff?
They said because I had not availed myself of the supervised visitations, which were requiring me to affirm my son as a girl, that I hadn't visited my sons. And since I hadn't visited my sons, that they could, she could move out of state.
Yeah. Great question right here. A Mole's Vision said, were court watchers allowed in the courtroom during the final hearing?
No, my case was in California was illegally sealed. In California, there's only one reason that a court can seal a case. It can make certain aspects of the case confidential, but to seal a case is a different thing. And the only case you can do that in California is for a parentage case. That's where you're trying to determine who are the parents of a child, and the court is going to determine that. My children, we know who the mother and father of my children are. That's never been in dispute. They declared it a parentage case so they could seal it because of the publicity they knew would be harmful to them and would show their criminal actions. So they sealed the case. They not only restricted online access to the records, they actually deleted the records from the county database. Even I can't access my own records. During the case, I could not access my own records. I went to trial not even seeing some of these filings. The judge in some cases couldn't get the filings. They totally deleted it. Further, all of the transcripts are sealed. I had to make an objection all 7 days of the trial to sealing the transcript. All the transcripts are sealed. So you're not going to get to see what my expert witness said. You're not going to get to see where I prove that my ex-wife gave a false history to the psychologists. And I prove it with actual photos that she lied to them. You're not going to be able to see any of that, because if you did, you'd be outraged and you might not elect this judge again. So they totally illegally sealed it. They did not allow the press access or court watchers in the court.
And we tried, guys. I think that they had gave like this really big list of instructions if you wanted to be a court watcher. We had it out there. I had several people that was coming and they just shut it off. And it's sad that they can just do this because they want to. They do not want anybody seeing what actually goes on behind scenes. I mean, that is one of their biggest fears, and which is why we need to make sure that's what we're doing.
Oh, yeah. The things that your enemy most doesn't want is what you should be going after. A question here. Who was my expert? My expert was Miriam Grossman, who wrote a book called Lost in Translation, and she completely destroyed opposing counsel and their expert. I mean, completely destroyed them. It was actually embarrassing. My cross-examination of their expert, this woman who thinks she's a man, I feel for her because it's a totally logically incoherent ideology. Towards the middle of my exam, the judge just said, look, this is becoming mentally abusive for the witness, because it was just so embarrassing, the stupid shit she was saying. It's the kind of thing that they didn't, exactly the kind of thing they did not want you to see.
Yeah. Kareen Kissel said, is there anything else you can do with this order now? Can you appeal to the higher court?
Yes, I can appeal. I have to get what in Texas are called findings of fact and conclusions of law. They're called a statement of judgment in California. I need to get those first from the court. I have 10 days to request them. It's different in California. I have to specifically request the things that I want to know about the judgment, and then the judge has to reply with facts and law. This is going to be interesting because in the ruling and the facts that he cites, he never even mentions my expert's name. It's as though my expert never testified. None of the testimony and evidence that I offered was mentioned. So it's going to be interesting getting these findings back from the court for appeal.
Connie regularly said, do we know of any other similar cases? I know there is a Montana case. Guys, there's even people in the chat right now. There's several cases. I even have one, Adam Vina, that was just on. I've had him on several times, guys. Not only is he going through like the same exact thing as Jeff, his ex is trying to get the name changed to Luna. But how many other cases like this, Jeff, have you seen?
That's the same name that they're using for my son as well. It's because there's a very popular transgender book that they give kids, which is called Luna. I've seen probably 100, around 100. I get calls and I get contacted by people all the time, fathers all the time, who are beside themselves. It's becoming a kind of silver bullet. I think it's become an alternative.
Oh,
yeah, I think it's become an alternative to domestic violence allegations.
Yes.
You can say your kid's can say your kid's transgender and drive drive the father out of the children's lives using medical evidence rather than speculative accusations.
And guys, all right, I want to dive a little bit deeper into that, Jeff. There is laws in the state of California that makes it to where if the parent doesn't go along with the delusion, that it's abusive and they will lose access to the child. So if you're in one of these cases and you want to get the control, you can use this and it works. It works very easy. But there are several different laws in the state of California that they've used to trap the parent in this. Can you mention a few of those, Jeff?
Yeah, well, first of all, their domestic violence laws are insane. All that's required, no overt act is even required by the abuser. All that's required is emotional distress on the part of the victim. I have a friend of mine whose court filings apparently caused emotional distress in his ex-wife, and his court filings were ruled domestic violence, and he was given a lifetime no contact order for his kids because of his court filings. They were considered domestic violence. So, California is insane in that regard. Also, California has a completely different concept around possession and access. And failure to avail yourself of possession is a big deal in California. And so me not going to supervised visitations is a big deal.
So yeah, there was a viewer over on Instagram that mentioned like it's only happening to fathers. Do you know of any case where it's the father that is pushing this and it's the mom trying to pull back? I'm sure there's got to be one, but for the most part, we see this as single moms that are doing this to their kids, and I'm curious why you think they are doing that.
It's I don't know of a single case where it's a father versus a mom on it.
I don't either.
With boys, it's the mother trying to trans them to a girl, and it usually happens pre-puberty. With girls, it's usually peer group pressure, and it happens after they go to college. So there's a big difference in the patterns that we see. But in both cases, it's women driving it. Women are driving the transgender movement.
Aaron Marsh on Facebook said, can you talk a little bit about your other son, Jude, and how this entire thing has impacted him?
So let me tell you a little anecdote about raising my sons when I realized I had to raise them very differently. And it shows you the power of genetic heritage, because these boys were so young. They were almost 2 years old, but not two yet. I could not understand the cartoons. You know, the modern cartoons don't even make any sense to me. I can't even follow them. So I went back to what I watched. I got the Johnny Quest DVDs. You know, I mean, they actually use real guns. People don't get up when they get shot. They do real adventures and stuff like that. My kids love those things. And we were watching this one called The Invisible Monster one time. And I was listening to my boys, and James was getting all excited. The monster was chasing this little dog Bandit. And James was saying things like, I think Bandit's fast enough to get him. There's no way, you know, the monster can't catch up. But even so, Bandit's really clever. He can move fast in this way. And Jude was saying things like, why is that monster so angry at that dog? The dog looks a little scared. I don't know. You know, so I realized I got one son living the outer life of the characters and another son living the inner life of the characters. So Jude was the one living the inner life of the characters. And so Jude judges people by what he thinks is important to them as people, not their actions. He judges people by their thoughts and feelings. And I think in Jude's mind, he's a protector for his brother. And he's been taught that in order to protect his brother, he has to defend the idea that his brother's a girl. But I don't really think Jude believes it. And I don't think Jude's ever believed it. One time we came back from the creek, we were hunting rabbits, and we about to go eat. So we all piled in the shower to hurry up and shower up and clean up before we went to the dinner table. Jude just pointed down at James's penis and said, why do they keep calling him a girl? I mean, he's got a penis. You know, he knows this. So I think it's had a terrible moral effect on him, because his basic question is, when is it okay for me to lie? That, you know, the 10 Commandments say I'm not supposed to lie. So they're telling me to lie. When is it okay to lie? And I think it's had morally corrupting effect on him.
Michael Keller said, Eric, if the mom has a history of mistreating her children, isn't there a way to get her of any parental rights? You know, I do believe there was another case similar. Harrison Tinsley was going through, and I can't remember exactly why he ended up getting rights back to his kid, but wasn't that a case where this would have played into that, Jeff?
No, it's not really applicable. Sadly, okay. I wish it was. Tinsley's ex-wife was just flat out caught in physical abuse of the children. And okay. I mean, actually pretty bad physical abuse. I don't want to describe it, but bad physical abuse of the children. My wife is much too smart for that. She prefers to drug my children, and she's a pediatrician, so she knows how to fake all this stuff.
Eliza said, can you share the case file now?
No, it is sealed. If I were to release it, I would immediately be put in the LA County jail.
Has there ever been a point in time where you actually saw in person your son in a dress?
Oh yeah. There's pictures out on the internet. If you search for my
I've seen
name,
them.
you'll see pictures of James in a dress. I actually, to test the hypothesis that my ex-wife was telling me that he's a girl, I kept dresses here at home for him. I had 2 dresses that he could wear right here. I put them in his closet. Said, anytime you want to put those on, it's right there. You can put them on anytime.
I never
And
knew that.
yeah, the third time I got him for possession after that, I heard some noise downstairs. I went downstairs, and James was secretly putting them at the bottom of the trash can so I wouldn't notice they'd been thrown away. He threw them away in the middle of the night.
That is crazy, man. Amol said, did they use your social media against you, your freedom of speech?
Oh, yeah, that's been their primary case against me. It's actually what the judge used in the current ruling. And he says that I have relentlessly sought to use my children to further a political agenda. Okay, yeah, that's true. I don't know. America is a democratic country, and law is made from specific cases. I don't know how you make law without considering a specific case. It's true in the courts. The courts don't make law by some abstract argument process. They consider the facts of specific cases. So do legislators. Legislators look at specific things that are going on in the country and create laws from those. So it's very important that we be able to talk about our cases, because the legislature can't understand what laws need to be made, because law is made from specific cases.
Benji Krim said, do you think these 100 or so cases are mostly an act of vengeance aimed at hurting the other parent, or someone who has ideologically lost their way?
I think it's a combination. I think more and more it's being used as a silver bullet, like domestic violence.
Corinne said, has there been any other kids your son's age having this done? Here in teens, but this age. Well, I mean,
yeah.
Adam's kid, I think, is what, 3?
Yeah. Adam Vina, yeah. For boys, it's mostly pre-puberty. Boys, it starts early. Most boys are looking at transitioning at 8 or 9 by their mothers. Had I not passed the bill here in Texas and got this stuff outlawed, it's in the medical records for my son. They plan to castrate him at age 8 or 9.
This is a good one. I don't think we've ever went through this one. Jeff Amol said, where does her family stand on this gender change?
That's a great question.
Yes.
So this is stuff I didn't know until after I was married to her for 2 years. I was sitting down talking to her mother, who I liked, and we were having tea. And I found out her mother is a Lutheran pastor, which I had no idea. And her mother was the Lutheran pastor that split the Lutheran denomination in 2 over gay marriage. So her family has a long history in this stuff. Turns out her sister is gay now. Her sister says that she's a man. Her sister has now named herself after my ex-wife's previous husband before me. So there's just some bizarre stuff going on in that family that I did not know about until about 2.5 years into the marriage.
She named herself after your ex's previous husband.
That is correct.
Any idea as to why?
I have no idea why. I just can't speak to the level of sociopathy and psychopathy that I've witnessed throughout all of this.
Brian Harrell said, has one single lawyer reached out to you to help at all?
No, they haven't. And I've received no pro bono work in 10 years.
I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Jeff, or somebody that might have came in a little bit later. I really want to stress this one. I know you do as well. Alan Oath there from Texas said, can you explain to those why you choose not to attend supervised visits? I've been defending you on this issue. There is going to be those people. It's the main thing. In this case, rather than seeing the thousands of things that show you what this person is doing, they try to find like one or two things that they can to say, oh, this is why this is happening to him. You know, just deny all of this, but this is the one they always go back to. Well, he won't do the visitations.
Yeah. Hey,
Why
Alan,
not?
how you doing? Alan's a good friend of mine, and I'm happy to see him here. Actually, I've followed it closely, and I've even tracked the demographics of the complaints about me not going to supervised visitation on X. And I've got, I think I've got close to 10,000 comments now, so I have a pretty good handle on this. It's almost all white women who are complaining about it. And here's what I think is going on in these white women's minds. They're like, a father should do anything to be with their kids. And the idea that fathers should fight for their kids is somehow like really ingrained in the psyche of white American women. But the fact is, no father should ever have to fight for his kids.
Absolutely not.
And the only reason that fathers in America have to fight for their kids, it's because of white women who are not letting them see their kids. So I think it's an expression.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I think it's an expression of the idea that the women belong to the mother, and these people who want me to go to supervised visitation are saying, you have to jump through whatever hoops the mom wants you to, and you just need to do that as a good dad. That's a good dad, just jumps through all the hoops that the mom wants. The thing is, supervised visitation is not a neutral intervention in the parent-child relationship. It's extremely toxic to the children. And it's probably not reparable. What I determined from my 2 visits is the anxiety. Jude is not a child that has anxiety. The fear that Jude had was induced by the supervised visitations. And I think it could have become a chronic anxiety associated with me rather than with the supervised visitation. So there's literally no reason for men to ever do supervised visitation. First of all, I know your audience has heard me say this before. I don't follow illegal orders and mandates from the government. And that's why I didn't follow the gag order. I didn't follow the lockdown orders. I just don't do it anymore, and I'm never going to do it again. So I consider supervised visitation to be an unlawful interference in the parent-child relationship. Unless there's been a criminal finding of abuse or neglect, the state has no right to interfere in my parent-child relationship. And I'm not going to grant that to the courts by going to supervised visitation, especially because it's harmful to my children. Really what it is, it's just another way in which the courts alienate fathers from their children. The courts know, and all the studies show, that supervised visitation is an alienating activity. It's not done to safeguard the kids. But the courts do it because they want to alienate the father. That's the goal. And I'm not playing along with that bullshit.
Don't blame you 1 second, man. I'd be doing the same exact thing. You know, your post yesterday, it was shared. I forget, it's been viewed like 15 million times, man, over there on X. But the last little piece that you put on there, I wanted to go through this, Jeff. You said, let my story be a cautionary one for young men. Fathers have no rights to their children. Do not enter the family law system. Now, was that something that you said in the heat of the moment, or would you still stand by that? Do not go into the family law system.
No, I tell young men all the time not to get married. You cannot get married, and you really can't have children in the conjugal way, because frankly, you just stand such a high risk of your children's lives being destroyed. And if you look at what's happening to my children, it's not just that, they're going to have a bad life or have emotional problems. They're snuffing out the grandchildren that I'm going to have. They're snuffing out my family line. It's being destroyed. My whole family lineage is now destroyed because of this. And that can be done. I mean, I have a friend of mine in Houston. His wife divorced him, and they were devout Catholics and converted his children to Islam. And there's absolutely nothing he can do about it. I have, I have lots of friends who've had similar experiences. So you can't, if you just look at the facts and the outcomes that happen in the family court system, once you're married, you're in the system, whether you like it or not. You are regulated under family law.
Yep. Once
you have children by a woman, whether you're in wedlock or not, you are regulated by family law. The only safe thing for a man today is to never enter the system. So you just can't have children that way. You can adopt or use a surrogate.
Chris Farrell said, why is it always the pediatric pretend care ex-wives who pretend child protection or parental alienation perks and profits? This is certainly a parental alienation case. Would you say, obviously, I mean, this is no doubt a case of parental alienation?
Oh, yeah. The very purpose of her transing my son is to alienate me from my sons. I mean, that's the very purpose of it. Why is it always pediatric? Because pediatrics has absorbed this idea that children belong to the mother and not to the father. And modern medicine and modern psychology just reflect this irrational belief.
There was a question in there from a guy that got really upset that I didn't read it for you right away. I was waiting for the right moment, but wanting to know what we would need to do in the legislature to get some laws passed against parental alienation.
Well, as I've said, the simplest, you have to keep things simple, and it's got to be simple, and it can't have any discretion for the judge. Because what we know from family law is every time you give a judge discretion, he's going to misuse it. Okay. And he's going to misuse it widely and hurt thousands of kids. So we got to take discretion away from judges. And the way to do that is, I think, very, very simple. If there has not been a criminal trial, not one in family court under preponderance of the evidence standard, but a criminal trial on no reasonable doubt standard, in which abuse or neglect has been established. If that doesn't exist, the court simply cannot interfere in the parent-child relationship whatsoever. It just needs to be as cut and dried and simple as that. I've seen lots of complicated proposals and things like that. That's the fundamental issue. Other things we could do that are fairly simple and would be very effective. Make all interlocutory decisions in family court appealable. That would provide a lot more accountability. There's a few simple things we could do that would end all this, but they all basically come down to giving judges more oversight and removing discretion from judges. They simply should not be allowed to interfere in your parent-child relationship unless there's been abuse or neglect by a criminal standard, not by a preponderance of the evidence in a family court.
Right.
My Twitter handle is @JeffYoungerShow. @JeffYoungerShow. All one word. Why is it Jeff Younger Show? Because my life had become so public, I felt like I was in the Truman Show. I don't really have a show. It's just a joke on my excessively public life.
Yeah, definitely been out there, man. Taylor Smith said, is this a UCC JEA case now that California is making rulings?
Yeah, that's people have asked me. I agreed to have the case transferred to California. A lot of people have asked me why. Well, first of all, I had a hanging judge. Bloody Mary Brown, a 301st District Court in Dallas County, Texas, is a hanging judge. She didn't sustain a single objection of mine in 3 years. She never let me testify in 3 years. And she never let my experts testify in 3 years. So she was controlling evidence to get the rulings that she wanted. I never had a chance in that court. So that's one reason. Second reason is it would have moved to California anyway after 6 months. Once my children reside in California, The case moves to California. My ex can file a suit and move it to California under the UCCJEA. So I agreed to move the case. And since it's now been adjudicated in California, it's no longer a UCCJEA case, but it was.
So, I mean, that's just one of those things. It's completely off my radar going over. What is the UCCJEA?
It's the Uniform Child Custody and Jurisdiction Act, and it basically sets uniform rules for how cases move between the states when the children or the parties move to other states.
Okay, gotcha. Probably
Colin
one of the most important.
Colin Campbell says the child is lucky not to have you in their life. Well, that's very nice, Colleen.
Yeah. Man. You know, it's one of the things, man, the opposition to this stuff. I was shocked to see just how many people support this type of stuff happening.
Oh, it's mostly women, and we still just can't get it through our heads that children belong to both their mother and their father. They don't just belong to the mother.
Nope. One of the most important questions I've seen, and this is something, guys, that stay pilled. I'll be making sure to report on this much more. I know me and you were supposed to get up and talk tomorrow so we can think of where to go forward with that. But A Mole's Vision said, what can we do to help?
So the best thing you can do to help is, this is an answer you're probably not going to expect. Yeah, Brian Harrell talks about ending judicial immunity. We should talk about that. Don't let me forget that one. The best way that you can help on this issue is to work in your state to get laws passed that make this stuff illegal, and not only make the medical procedures illegal, but to also classify them as criminal child abuse. If you classify them as criminal child abuse, people can't take their children out of state and do it and then come back. As soon as they come back, they'll be prosecuted for child abuse, so they can't do it. That's the most important thing that you can do to help. Because I'm not here just seeking help for myself. I always say, save James, save thousands of kids.
That's right.
Right. The other thing is, be very vigilant about your schools, and make sure that they're not transitioning kids in your schools. And finally, I'll tell you something that's really disturbed me that I learned through all this. In all the 50 states, primary care providers, this is doctors, nurses, psychologists, psychiatrists, physician's assistants, all of them can exert a right of privacy for your child against you. Let me say that again. Licensed care providers may legally exert a right of privacy for your child against you. And it was originally designed with good intentions. The idea is, if a child reports abuse to a doctor, the doctor may not want to inform the parents about that because it might cause more abuse. So the idea is the doctor can hold that in confidence, right? The problem is the doctors are not required to tell you that they have exercised such a right and have exerted a right of privacy for the child against you. And the doctors have no time limit or anything they have to do with that confidence. They can just hold it forever. So you have to be very careful with licensed care providers. Never leave your children alone with care providers. You know, and most of the time, if you take your kids in for a pediatrics well check, they'll ask the parents to step out of the room so they can talk to the child alone. Don't do that. Don't leave them alone ever with pediatricians. Here's the problem. Most schools have a school nurse and a school counselor. That means you can't leave your children alone at school either. That was the legal way they were transitioning my son to a girl behind my back. The school counselor exerted a right of privacy for my son against me, and she began to transition my son and counsel him to be a girl without telling me, and it's perfectly legal. So we need to change those laws. If a physician or care provider exerts a right of privacy for the child against the parent, the care provider should be required to notify the parent so the parent can go to court and find out exactly what's going on.
Got a good one right here from Matthew Dotson. He said, "Are you a citizen of California or Texas? Wouldn't diversity give jurisdiction to the federal court, especially if you are concerned that California would make an attempt to charge you with contempt for disclosing the file?"
I am a citizen of Texas, but there's no interstate controversy. Just because there is a controversy between people in different states doesn't mean necessarily that a valid interstate controversy exists. I spent a lot of time reading the law of jurisdiction, federal law of jurisdiction. Let me tell you, my friend, it is a cure for insomnia. It is some of the strangest case law out there, and it's quite complex. The UCC JEA was an attempt to simplify it, and it's the guide that any federal court would probably use.
David Passara said, "When you say castrate, is that chemical or surgical?"
The imminent threat is chemical castration. The medical records show that they are planning to surgically castrate James and have already talked to him about it and described different options for him to store his sperm up in that event.
He also followed up. So he said, "So you had no representation in this in California." Jeff, I think you went through many attorneys. Did you have an attorney in the California case?
I started off with an attorney, and then I had to fire them, just like I fire all my attorneys. I don't recommend that anybody use attorneys anymore in family court. I don't even think they're, unless there's an old joke, but it's 100% true. A good attorney knows the law, and a great attorney knows the judge. And if your attorney has given campaign donations to judges, or is a good friend of theirs, or goes to the same church, maybe that attorney would be worth having. But if you don't have an attorney like that, the attorney's useless. You can learn the rules of evidence yourself. You can learn the civil rules of procedure. You can learn the local rules of courts, and you can do it yourself. And since you know the story better than a lawyer, you'll be able to argue your case better than they could.
And you did, by far. When you could have been court watchers. I remember watching one case, and I was, what are these attorneys doing?
I know. I just don't use them anymore. I'm done with attorneys.
Oh man.
I don't even use attorneys in my federal case.
Roman Brick said, "Jeff, do you see a societal change, deeper understanding that family law, part of a worldwide communist NWO agenda, coordinated behind the scenes, just like the COVID psyop?"
I think you can never go wrong highly estimating the power of establishment propaganda. And I have to say, Americans are uniquely vulnerable to globalist propaganda. In my travels in Europe and Asia, I've had many humorous conversations where people, trying not to be offensive, confide in me. They're like, you know, our governments lie to us too, but we don't believe them. Americans actually believe it when their government lies. I'm like, yeah, they do actually. I would say most Americans have absolutely no idea the corruption in family courts. I do think one good thing about the Trump prosecutions is that it demonstrated to everyone and made it very credible that court corruption is present. Like it's there. People find that more credible now. You know, how many of us have faced this problem? You describe what's going on and they say, well, they must have done that because you did something terrible, right? So it's much more credible now, but I don't see until our guys get much better at counter propaganda.
Yep.
And I notice I didn't say education. I didn't say education.
I meant to bring that up earlier because one of the things I've been told from ever since I started this thing is like the answer to ending all this madness is that we need to go educate judges and attorneys. And I'm sitting here like, these are people that went to school, that work in it every single day. And us as parents that are going through these struggles need to go educate them on why we are being screwed. That is one of the most stupidest answers. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but it's just gloves off right now. That is absolutely nuts, guys. There is no educating them. They know what's going on.
They know what's going on. This is one of the very funny experiences that I had when I was lobbying for the law. I realized I was sitting in a senator's office, and I was actually trying to convince him that castrating little boys was wrong. And I thought, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like, if you don't know that castrating little boys is wrong, I have to force you to do the right thing.
It's like saying murder is, you have to educate them. That's wrong.
It's
anybody with a brain should know this is something that you
Rustin has a great question there. It's fascinating to me that our guys still think that this is all happening because people just don't realize it's happening. It's planned. It's a planned demolition. They already know everything. Every single legislator in the state knows it. All of the federal judges know it. Everybody knows it. It's that there's too much money on the line, and there's issues that implicate power in local communities, and they're not going to fix it unless you make them do it.
Oh man, a good one. I know you got I don't know. Well, I'll get to that one next. Was this the question you was talking about right here, Jeff?
Yes.
Do you think the new Trump administration could help your case?
I do think he can. I hope he fulfills his promise. He said on day one, he's going to remove federal certification from hospitals that are doing this to kids. That will effectively terminate these procedures. And it could give my son 4 extra years. And by that time, he's in Tanner stage 4 now. He should be out of puberty by that time.
Lauren Cody Jackson said, Jeff, why do you think the churches don't back fathers, considering they are the spiritual leaders of the home? I have a hard time with this one. Lauren, you are not alone. This is something that we've talked about numerous times, Jeff, but I'll let you answer that for him.
Man, okay. I give full honest answers, and some of you may not like the answers to some of these questions. So full disclosure, I'm an Orthodox Christian. I'm not non-denominational. I'm pre-denominational. I'm Catholic, but I'm not Roman Catholic. And I'm evangelical, but I'm not Protestant. So I think there's a fundamental problem in the churches. One, they have been incredibly feminized. And there's a really good book you can get called Why Men Hate Going to Church. It's written by a Protestant. Very good book. And it starts off with something I had never thought of. It just analyzes church hymns, which sound a lot like love songs to Jesus. And no man is ever going to be comfortable singing love songs to another man. It's just discomforting. So that's one thing. They become really organized around feminine needs.
Oh yeah.
One way to see this is to compare Mother's Day sermons to Father's Day sermons. Mother's Day sermons, they extol all the virtues of motherhood and so forth. Father's Day sermons, they do usually what I call I'm the only real man in the room, where the pastor tells men what shits they are because they're not fulfilling their duties, right? So yeah, and how many men are going to come back after that? Like, they're not, right? They're just not going to do it. So that's the second thing. The third thing is the father is very important for the spiritual education of children. The Greek Orthodox Church did a 20-year longitudinal study on this, where they followed children from high school, 4 years of high school, through 4 years of college. And they were looking for what correlates with children continuing to go to church while they're in college. The only variable that matters is whether the father took them to church. It didn't matter if the mother took them to church. It didn't matter if another family member took them to church. The only children that continued to go to church were the children that were taken to church by their fathers. And that shouldn't surprise you. We know the effects of father absence and so forth. And finally, here's the controversial part. I think there's something fundamentally wrong with Protestant ecclesiology, not theology. I'm very partial to Protestant theology. As Orthodox, we really appreciate their get back to the original church approach. It's the ecclesiology, the governance of these churches, that I think makes them uniquely vulnerable to leftist propaganda. And I'll just leave it at that. Those are why I think the issues are.
You know, I'll tell you, Lauren. I mean, nothing has upset me more than when I would see Jeff go and fight this, and many times he would be there by himself, especially like with the legislation and stuff like that. I think one of the main reasons, I'll just call it for what I think it is, one of the main reasons they're not getting involved and trying to get these laws changed is because they would lose their nonprofit status. They're afraid of losing money, and we've got too many of these Christian churches that they've got to keep their congregation comfortable. They don't want to rattle any cages. And being the son of a pastor, my dad would have backed you, Jeff. I know good and well. My father would have been there for you.
It's quite interesting. You know, I've gone to a lot, testified to, Senate and House hearings in 13 states. And every single time I do this, it's the same exact thing. 0 Christian pastors show up on our side of the issue, and they'll have 20 to 100 on their side of the issue. The pro-trans pastors come out, and the conservative pastors don't. Now, I've directly gone to some of the biggest churches in Dallas and asked them directly about this. I spoke to the board one time of a very large church. And I directly asked them, and they said, well, they're afraid of losing their tax-free designation if they engage in politics. So I said, well, why don't you just pay your taxes and then you can preach the gospel freely? And they looked at me like I was crazy. But it just
How dare you ask us to lose money?
Never even occurred to them. There's huge problems there. What I do find is that it's the smaller churches, what I call Protestant house churches that are much smaller. These tend to come out and volunteer and do things.
Yeah.
I think they're also the backbone of the anti-abortion movements among the churches. And so there's really is something to the smaller churches. Yeah.
Organized religion, man. Jeff, we got a question here from Pat. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you up front. He's been on the show. Pat is going through this with his teenage daughter being transitioned. So he knows what it's like to be in your shoes, but he said, okay, question. This happens to me at the doctor's office. What happens if I say, no, I won't leave the room?
Typically the physician will just continue the examination with you in the room. And if a physician won't continue while you're in the room, why would you ever leave them alone with your child?
Let me get to another thing, man. Like, one of the things that has been bothering me is because I know you on a personal level outside of this. How long have you been doing this? That you've been having to go to the California courts?
It's been a
little over
about a year.
Right?
About a year. Yeah.
And how often were you having to go out there?
Every week. I have 2 or 3 hearings a week. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Did you have somewhere to stay out there?
I eventually got one just because it was cheaper than hotels. But I spent a couple $100,000 just on this one little thing.
What's the current financial status, man? I know you haven't been able to work.
No, I'm living off savings. I've spent most of my retirement. I'm just not hireable in high tech because I'm known as the anti-transgender guy. And so HR just my resume just doesn't make it out of the pile. I've tried to network with friends of mine that have, connections in IT departments and things, and that's what I'm trying to do right now.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's one thing to be fighting this battle and you got, the courthouse just right down the road, but going back and forth from Texas to California,
Mm-hmm.
like that is crazy. And the fact that you have done it for as long as you have, man, I have just the utmost respect for you and admiration, because there's many people that wouldn't have been able to do it. And rightfully so. I would have understood if somebody was in your shoes and said, I just can't afford to do this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just an aspect of being a dad. My son has a right to expect that I give him everything I've got to protect him, and he's going to get it. That's simple.
When was the last time you got to see him, Jeff?
It's been about 3 years now.
3 years.
Yep.
Tim Stremo said, "What do you do in high tech? Perhaps one of us can help."
The best way to find that out is just to go to my LinkedIn profile, which is under Damon, Damon Younger. I use my middle name, trying to evade the initial Google screening. But I have an extensive background in applied mathematics, scientific computing, cybersecurity, and managing large AI projects and logistics in the oil industry.
John Gallman on here said, in as much as you feel comfortable, tell them what's next for Jeff.
Well, I'm going up on appeal next. I'm going to go ahead and fight that up to the California Supreme Court. And hopefully by that time, Trump will have outlawed these procedures.
I believe he's going to do it, man. I really do believe he's going to do it. And rightfully so. This is one of those, I can't believe we're even having to get legislation passed, talking about domestic violence and abuse. What could be more abusive than wanting to castrate a child?
Yeah, there's just nothing worse than that. I mean, in the worst conquests and abuses in history, they didn't do things like this to kids.
I know this has been another topic of discussion. A Mole's Vision said, is he ordered to pay child support or medical bills?
Yes, they expect me to pay for the castration of my child as medical child support. And I'm not going to do it. So about 6 months ago, I just quit paying child support, and I'm never going to pay it again. So eventually, I'll probably be doing a post-prison interview on Dad Talk, because they're definitely going to throw me in prison. But I'm just simply not going to pay child support into a system that's going to sexually abuse my son. They can go fuck themselves.
I don't know why that hit so hard, man. I mean, the lengths that a father will go through, What do you want? One day James is going to see all this, man.
Yeah, he will. When I started all this, I said, number one, I'm never going to sacrifice my honor. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to become a cheat or thief. Second thing I said is I'm not going to ever hurt my son by any of my actions. And the third thing I said, I'm not going to let any of my resources or property be used to hurt my son. So we've reached number 3. So they can go fuck themselves. I'm not paying child support. I'm not paying anything that could hurt my son. And frankly, I'm thinking about trying to create a movement of fathers to engage in civil disobedience and simply stop paying child support. I've done the math on this, and if 15% of fathers, 15% of fathers, stop paying child support, the entire system would collapse, and they would have to change the laws. So I'm not doing it, though. I don't care whether people join me or not. But to me, if you don't have parental rights to see your children freely, if you can't direct or at least participate in directing the mental, moral, and spiritual education of your children, then you shouldn't pay child support, even if it's ordered by the court. I say go fuck themselves.
You sound like Elon Musk.
Yes.
Musk, we got a lot in common, man. I hope he sees this, man. If we could get him involved, I could just see new life getting breathed all over this thing. Mia said, with Trump in office, do you think this judge's career is safe after this ruling? Well, there's a caveat to that, Mia. What's the judge's career look like now, Jeff, from your understanding?
I'm the last case for this judge. He's retiring right after my case. They waited. They chose a judge that had no other cases on his docket and is retiring. So he would receive no fallout because he's leaving the court. So California is very corrupt. It's a dictatorship of one party and the Democrat Party. And the way it works is this: judges towards the end of their term resign, allowing the governor to appoint. Then the next judge runs as the incumbent and always wins. So my judge is going to retire. He's going into private judging where he'll make $1,800 an hour. That's what he's doing.
Chris said, your wife does not expect to date anyone anymore, does she? This is ex-wife. Let's make sure we put that out there. But do you know if she's gotten involved?
I have no idea.
Nor do you care.
No, and listen, you got to understand I have been falsely accused of domestic violence, and I've actually been through a criminal trial in Texas. A lot of people don't know that. So, I had to hire a criminal defense attorney, had to hire private investigators, the whole shebang, spent $100,000 on this. And the jury came back in less than 10 minutes with a not guilty verdict and was admonished by the judge and the bailiff because they were insulting my ex-wife from the jury box. So I've been through this stuff, and so I honestly have no contact with her. I don't do email, I don't do phone. I have no contact with her because she could use all that against me and claim domestic violence in California.
Bring Out the Book said, as a pastor, I lament and am enraged by the fact that the church has failed you and many like you. The short answer is those are churches that have allowed the sociology of today to inform their theology. I would love to see more of the churches get behind this, but I guess let's strip this back for a second, because we're going on almost 2 hours now, and like I said, guys, keep your eyes peeled on this. We've got some planning to do. I can tell you this: we have the context and stuff to do many things. Jeff, one of the conversations we probably have every time the two of us are together is like, man, if we could just get this movement to organize and do what they're supposed to do, it's not as hard. Yes, it is hard. Don't get me wrong, but it's not as hard as it's been made out to be. It's just getting everybody to do that part and to organize effectively.
Like, are you kidding me?
Where do you see that coming?
I mean, cross-dressing trannies can exert more political force than the 40 million fathers paying child support in this country. Are you fucking kidding me? That's not real. Dude, that shit is not a real argument. I'm sorry, but the problem is fundamentally our guys are under gag orders and they're terrified of causing waves because they know that if they go back into court, they might lose their kids. The courts are terrorizing these men. And that's the fundamental problem. Until we find a way around that, we're not going to get participation. It's not because our guys are weak. It's not because our guys are lazy. I'm sick of hearing people in the fathers' rights groups talk about other fathers that way. Are there lazy fathers? You damn right. Are there no good fathers? You damn right. Is that the majority? No, man. Most of these guys are hardworking dudes that love their kids.
That can't take time off work.
And they're scared to death that if they cause political waves, they'll be hauled into court and the judge will take their kids away from them. You can't blame them. That's a reasonable fear. We have to find a way to address that fear for them in order to incentivize their participation. And that's on us as thought leaders to do that. It's not on them. I take responsibility for this. I don't blame them. I don't blame the masses of fathers out there. I'm different on this. I have a very different point of view, as you can tell.
Where do you see it going to from here?
My case or the movement?
Just as a whole, man. Like the plan of action.
I think things are going to get worse in my case, and for fathers in general. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I don't think we're going to see political change to correct the excesses of family court without a mass civil disobedience movement. And until it reaches the situation where it's that bad, I don't think we're going to get there. And I think if we're going to start organizing, we should organize around successful political PACs that have already done this. A good example would be successful gun rights groups, other groups that have been very successful in achieving their stated goals, and we should copy them. And we should have loose, informal affiliations with people who do civil disobedience. But I really believe until we have civil disobedience, nothing's going to change.
You know, I'll be the first one to say it now, man. Like I've actually cautioned about that in the past. Like we got to be very careful that, you know, and it'll be used against us to make it worse. I think at this point I've realized when you've tried all peaceful means and you've done everything that you can do. I mean, your case is one of the perfect examples. You did everything that the system told you that you needed to do as a father to get justice, and there is no justice to be found. There was nothing else that you could have done.
No, there's nothing else I could have done. And this is another thing. Look, we have to start thinking very seriously about what it means to exert political power. A lot of our guys think because you get onto social media and you make a good argument or you embarrass a judge or something, I'm all for all that stuff. That's what I call civil disobedience. Please do that. Do lots of that. But that isn't political power. Political power is when you can remove a judge by an election or remove a judge by impeachment. If you don't have the ability to remove a judge, you do not have political power. So the way to think about this is whenever you're taking an action and you're asking yourself, am I exercising political power? Am I using power for the good of children and for the good of parents? Your simple question is, can I remove the judge? And if the answer is no, then you don't have any political power. That's what we need to focus on. Removing these sons of bitches from office. Not anything else. That's got to be the focus.
I mean, just, you know, a couple of weeks ago during election, one thing that kept getting thrown around that night was them talking about the importance of the male vote.
Oh, yeah.
Guys, we had a lot to do with what happened there, and we do have political power, and they need to see that.
Yes.
I'm right there with you. We need to make sure these are people that are getting elected.
You may recall, this was about 3 or 4 years ago. I was on Dad Talk. And I talked to you about how the Republican Party, especially, and the Democrat Party, most egregiously, both of them simply did not recognize that the male vote is their swing vote. They think that the female vote is their swing vote.
And they were counting on that female vote.
It's actually the male vote that's the swing vote. The base vote for both of the parties is white males.
Absolutely.
And here's the thing. Let's say you're in a Republican state like Texas. We know from the stats, it's very clear. Married people with children in intact families vote Republican. Everybody else votes liberal. So you would think it would be the number one issue for Republicans. To create Republican voters, you need to support marriage and fathers. But they don't do it. They literally can't shake off the vestiges of feminism to simply look at the empirical evidence. But this election clearly showed that white working men are the swing vote for the Republican and Democratic Party, because we took those voters from Democrats. When Republicans won, they took them straight from Democrats. Those were union voters. Young men who are working men who are union voters switched over to the Republican Party because the Democrat Party simply had an anti-male platform. And the parties better listen up here. So I think we are ripe for political action, and we can do it. But we have to stop thinking of agitation as political power. Agitation is useful, but it's not political power. It's only political power if you can remove the judge from office in an election or by impeachment. That's all. Political power is nothing more or less than that.
And they noticed that in this election. It's crazy because leading up to the election, we kept hearing, Kamala, she's hurting with the male voter, and that, they were trying to shame men into voting for them rather than giving them something to believe in. So what do? They go out and make ads that are suggesting that women aren't voting for her because of the toxic masculinity of their husbands and boyfriends.
Right.
That was how you get the male vote, Jeff.
Yeah, it's absolutely hilarious, the tone deafness. But it's not surprising. Let me, I'm finding this. I'm writing a couple of books.
Yeah,
and the traditional publishing industry, all of the publishing assistants in these publishing houses are all women. There really are no male editors at all.
Really, I didn't know that.
That's why getting through the traditional publishing houses as a man is extremely difficult. So the traditional publishers are only addressing the point of view of women in society. And then, because the books don't address the male point of view in the world, what do men do? They go play video games, places where it does express their point of view. And then we complain that they play video games and they're reading books. Well, how about you write books for them? I went to my son's school library when he was in second grade at Pinkerton Elementary in Capel. And I went in the library just to inspect the books. I literally could not find one book that had a male hero. They all had female heroines. Mm. So I asked the librarian to find one for me for my son, and she couldn't find one either. So I went and bought a couple hundred books like that I read as a boy, John Carter of Mars, Edgar Rice Burroughs, things that I read, Tarzan. I brought these books in, and they called me a week later and asked me to come pick them up because they said these books encouraged traditional gender stereotypes, and they wouldn't put them in the library. So it's like you have a system where, all of these factors are basically telling men that they're not part of society. And young men have just about had it with that, especially working class young men. And I love to see it. I love to see it.
I do too, man. I do too. I guess I will bring it up. I know this is, this gets brought up a lot. Susan Fletcher said, question, I've heard Anne isn't the boy's bio mother. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about that.
Yeah, we used an egg donor. And she's not genetically related to the boys, but she did carry the boys.
So guys, right before we get out of here, and I'm gonna, give a last few statements and then we'll get out of here. One of the things you said you wanted to make sure to go over, Jeff, and I don't want you to lose that opportunity, the importance of ending judicial immunity.
Yeah. So we have this crazy thing in America where we give judges and prosecutors absolute immunity under the law. And what does that mean? It means that even if the judge intentionally violated the law and in violating the law intended to harm someone in the court, including a litigant before the court, and the litigant was in fact harmed, the judge cannot be held criminally liable for violating the law. It means basically that if a judge acts in his official capacity, the judge cannot be held responsible for violating the law. This goes as far as if a judge intentionally, tilts a trial to get an innocent man executed, technically that would be covered under absolute immunity and you could not prosecute the judge. That's also true of prosecutors. Those are the only two entities I'm aware of that have absolute immunity in our legal system. Police officers have something called qualified immunity. And under qualified immunity, if the police officer reasonably believed that he was following the law and he had no intention to harm the person by taking his actions, then he can't be held criminally liable. My view is that the laws are so complicated that nobody understands them, that every citizen and every person in America should have qualified immunity. Basically, if you're not intending to violate the law, if you didn't know that it's actually a federal felony to transport live lobsters across state lines, and you transport a live lobster across state lines in order to have a dinner with your family, you're not violating the law because you reasonably you had a reasonable belief that you were acting within the law. The law is just too complicated and nobody knows what it is. So it's very interesting to me that for police officers, ignorance of the law is an excuse, but it's not for an ordinary citizen. We're held to every jot and tittle of the law. On the other hand, absolute immunity is just a prescription for tyranny. Nobody in our system should have absolute immunity from the law. If you act with malevolent intent, you know you're breaking the law, and somebody was actually harmed, you should be imprisoned. So we need to retract absolute immunity for judges and give them qualified immunity.
So guys, make sure that you're staying pilled to this case. I know people are wanting to know, like, what is the immediate thing? I mean, this just happened yesterday. And so there's a lot to wrap your head around. Obviously, you've been getting out there and making sure you're getting this out in media. I know at one point in time, you may be even throwing an idea around of starting your own thing, right, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not getting hired anymore because I'm Mr. Anti-Transgender, apparently. I'm just trying to save my son, but apparently that's what I am now. So I've got to think about starting something up, and I'm not sure where I'm going to go with it, but I want it to make a difference and have an impact in the States, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
So guys, we're going to try to get a plan of action. I can tell you, I was in some meetings today. We got some amazing opportunities. One thing that I'd like to work on immediately is I want to get Jeff and myself up to DC. I've got some stuff that can be done there. So keep your eyes peeled on it. I'll give you ways that you can help us do that. One thing I would love to look for in this community is someone that knows how to do fundraising. That's not my thing, but it's something that we're going to have to go against because we're going against some very big giants up there. Jeff, when talking about this legislation and stuff, I know you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but do you think this is something that's going to be able to go through the legislation really easy? Is like all of the answers? I mean, I guess you've pretty much already answered that. You said it's going to be civil disobedience. That
ultimately that's what's going to be required because the donor class is going to block this stuff to the very end. The prosecutors and the judges are going to defend their absolute immunity to the very end, to the point where, I can see them persecuting their political opponents and putting them in prison, hauling them into courts and putting them into prison to preserve absolute immunity. It's going to require civil disobedience. And I'm just going to tell you, if you're a father and you're dedicated to making change, you got to resign yourself that you're probably going to end up in jail every once in a while. I can just tell you, just like death, there are a lot of worse fates than death. There are a lot of worse things than death. Being a coward is a lot worse than death. Being someone who your son would be disappointed in is a lot worse than death. I'll tell you, jail is just lots of leisure time, 3 square meals a day. You get in shape. When you come out, you'll be nice and buff and trim. And you have plenty of time to work on your political strategies because you have near infinite leisure. So I don't fear jail. Be prepared when the time comes that you may have to violate the law to stand up for justice. We're entering a new era, I think, equivalent to the civil rights era, but for family court. The family courts have gone too far, and we're going to have to rein them back in.
Anything else, Jeff, that you'd like to get out to the audience that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
I would just like to thank everyone. I couldn't have continued and fought as hard as I have. I couldn't have given 100% without your encouragement and your kind messages to me. And it's, I think I speak for a lot of men that it's very nice to know that there are men and women out there that actually care about kids and care about these struggles. And I just want to thank you for being the kind of people that care enough about kids to look at these difficult issues that are very politically incorrect, but to look at the facts squarely and try to do the right thing for kids. I think it's a very impressive group of people that can do that, and not many political groups in the country can deal with reality the way this group can. You all impress me, and I'm grateful to know all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, man. And guys, I will tell you, just over, the last 5 years that I've been doing this, something is changing in the air. There's more people talking about this than they ever have. And people talking about this that I never thought would have talked about it. I think we have a very good opportunity right now, and we need to seize that moment. We really do. And it's cases like this, like, we have got to get something done, guys, because Jeff's story is not the only one, and there's just going to be more and more of these come up, and they're going to try to find loopholes to get around this. If Donald Trump, does pass that law, they're going to try to find their loopholes and ways to get around it. It is not going to quit. And I will say, probably the most disheartening thing for me was being at the Capitol when they were voting on the legislation to ban this in Texas, and I'm seeing hundreds of these people in this pro-trans movement. And, our guys were at work. I understand that they've got bills to pay and everything, but I'm like, this is the minority here. And look at how they pack this place out. We've got to change that, guys. We got to get our people to show up and speak up. And part of that is making sure that you have the resources and know where to get involved. And we're going to work very hard to make sure that you guys get that. And Jeff, man, I just want to say thank you for doing what you're doing. There's a lot of people that would probably, after what happened yesterday, say, I've done all I can do. I'm walking into the sunset. But you continue to get the word out on this. And I know that you're going to give it your all, man. So
yeah, 100%.
I appreciate it, brother.
Thanks, man.
We'll talk again soon.
All right. Take care. Bye.